Okay, welcome to today's showcase. I believe today is number 80, so that's pretty exciting. We're getting close to 100, which I'll have to do a celebration for. But for today, I think you'll notice some interesting things going on in the middle of the screen here. The spells for today's showcase, nothing too new here. We do have some new stuff-ish, but I haven't actually implemented it enough to the point where I think it's worth showing off over the new terrain stuff, which is instead of the spell stuff actually really new. It's completely revamped. I've actually even optimized some of our previous terrain, so I'm very excited to show all of that off. This is a bit of a teaser here. I'm showing the late stages of this production, and I'm going to go through each step and each step of the refinement. A couple things to note. First of all, I do understand in some of these clips there's a little bit of lag, a little bit of stuttering, and that's primarily because I have so many of these tiles on the screen, and that's part of the optimization I made. So there's this thing called relayering height, and I'm not going to go too far into those details, but essentially if you have a ton of stuff on your screen, it has to relayer everything every single time you move. So for this demonstration, I upped my run speed substantially. I think it's 5 times higher than what it normally is. And as a result of that fact, you can see in some areas it will stutter and skip a little bit, but if not for the run speed and if not for that, then we would be basically sitting in one map for the entire time. So it's kind of a necessary evil. I will say though that by the end of the showcase I did start fixing that, and I did implement that fix at some point or another. So toward the end you should see it getting a little bit better. I think I included a clip just to demonstrate that, but whatever the case, we are going to get started in just a second to sort of pre-roll what I'm about to show you guys. Our first change was allowing multiple maps, and I was wondering how I would do this for a very long time. I didn't want to use warpers like Nardo or whatever else. So instead of using warpers, we are doing a different method that I'm not going to go into right now, but it's much more efficient, and as a result we get these very smooth transitions where your screen fades, and it doesn't do the map name changes of the moment, but as you can see here, you see what I mean, right? It's this very smooth transition to black and then transition to transparency again. And we are currently running between the left and right top maps, and then now we're going to go to the south maps and then move between the left and right there. And you can go back up again. So this is a 2x2 grid of maps. All of these maps shown here, all 4 of them, are 100 by 100 tiles wide and tall. So you will see here you won't be able to move left. You can't move right off of the far right maps. You can't move south of the south maps, and you can't move up from the up maps. I think that makes sense, but the basic idea is if there isn't a map that you can go to from that direction, it won't let you go that way. Makes sense, but it was a little bit complicated to get done. The only downside to this, of course, is that even though these transitions, I think in my opinion, look pretty good without the map names even, it isn't very exciting. So obviously I had to do something about that. What I did was I plugged in some simplex noise, and if you guys don't know what simplex noise is, you might have heard of maybe of Perlin noise. Essentially it's similar to like static noise, if you guys know that, except it's ordered. It's what you call orderly noise, where they have, I would say, pools of maybe black and then pools of white, and they fade between those. So what I'm doing here is pulling those values from a simplex noise function, and then I'm making islands out of them. So I'm putting tiles where I think they should go, basically, which is, in other words, where those pools of black or where those pools of white are. As a result, we get these, I would say, pretty good looking islands. There's another demonstration here in a second of some of the other types of islands you can find, but I think that generally speaking, like that one right there, you get these really cool formations where they're kind of stretched and elongated, and in a lot of cases you can't really get that great terrain just by using noise. But in the case of Verdict, I think that they fit our style very well, and I think they fit the shape of what I would describe as alien space islands pretty well. They serve that purpose very elegantly, I would say. We are going to go on past this in a second, and this is something I showed off previously as well. It's just going to take a second to go through the rest of this, but autotiling. I'll just cut straight to the point. Autotiling is a huge thing, and it's the primary focus of the showcase, even though it's not going to take up the majority of the time. So the reason autotiling is so big is because for mappers, it's very annoying to have to place the 8 surrounding tiles of a basic tile by hand. So obviously that helps, but I posted a small GIF of this earlier. You can see I've highlighted it where it's moving, and just to let you guys know, as you can see here, it's not moving the right map, it's just doing the left map. This isn't how it works ordinarily. I've actually slowed it down substantially so that the human eye can see it. I've also colored the one it's focusing. So typically this just happens instantly. You don't even notice it happening. But here I've slowed it down, like I said, and I've colored it so you know what's happening and where it's happening. And if you haven't been able to catch on just yet, essentially what it's doing is it's going through every single tile that is set to be auto-tiled, and it's checking its surrounding tiles. And if it has one above it, but not one below it, for instance, then it might choose to be a bottom-facing column tile or something like that. That's a very dumbed-down version of what it's doing, but it's also not too difficult to understand, I would hope. But anyway, it's doing that for every single tile on every single map, or right now it's only doing the top left map, but then it'll move to the top right, and then it'll move to bottom left, and then it'll move to bottom right. So it goes through them in order like that. And it can get a little bit laggy, I will say that ahead of time, if you do it instantly, I will say. However, in fairness, we won't be doing this all at once. We won't be doing every single map all at the same time, and we won't be doing every single tile at the same time. Moreover, all of these are in the same layer. I've actually split them up into tile layers, or so I call them. So I can actually separate each map as I please, if I so chose. I haven't for this showcase, but I could. And if I do so, then it actually makes it very smooth, and it separates each into their own chunk, you could say. Whatever the case, we're going to move past this because there is an issue here, and that is that this Perlin noise auto-tiled looks great, but there's no purpose to it. It doesn't go between maps, so it kind of cuts off. As you can see here, I got a little stuck there, but as you can see, I've actually made it tile, so it now moves between maps. I guess is the way you could say it. So, like you just saw there, these Perlin noise values carry through the edges of maps, and I think it was also the case in the previous demonstration, but if you didn't notice previously, it actually thinks of the edges of the map as neighboring tiles, meaning it borders properly with them. Previously, it would form an edge there, which is obviously not what you want, especially if it's tiling between maps. So now they don't cut off anymore, which is an error that only I saw, I guess, but anyway, or those people in the Velocity Discord too, but whatever the case, as you can see, you can get some pretty cool formations that separate themselves in each of the four maps. And what I'm pointing out on screen right now is that it actually matches both sides. So you can see it's 3 on the left and then 3 on the right, so it's not like it's offset by anything either. Down here, we'll be able to go through and see that this matches up 3 maps, actually. And I want to go into the center here. I was hoping that that would be a ring, like a torus or something like that, but unfortunately we're not so lucky. Whatever the case, you can continue running around it to see. This is a little bit of what I mentioned earlier, where there's a tiny amount of lag. It's not too substantial, but obviously it's still noticeable. I hope you guys forgive me for that. It's, again, not what I would call a huge deal, but regardless. At some point, this is going to cut off, and here we go. So this is actually going to be probably the laggiest clip, and that's because I've re-enabled stars here, and this is the one prior to even any of the optimizations I've made, but what I was teasing at the beginning of this video was re-adding the star objects, and trust me guys, I can't even communicate how cool this looks in game. I think that the, and I say that literally because the buffering quality I think is going to ruin it a little bit, but whatever the case, I've said that tons, but anyway, the stars and everything, they're very cool to look at, especially with this randomized terrain, because it looks very natural and it looks as if you're actually on a space island in the middle of nowhere in the void. I know that's a little bit far-fetched. I probably wouldn't be able to tell you what that feels like exactly, but I'm really proud of how this turned out, just because while it is random, it is a little bit exciting to see regardless. So I hope you guys have the same feelings, and I hope you guys enjoyed seeing all of this stuff. I am going to go in a second just into some more details about this, so if you guys are ready to get off the excitement train, feel free to. I'm going to get a little bit more technical and actually talk about the future of what we intend for the maps in just a second here. So a lot of people brought a lot of concerns to me about randomized terrain generation, and I wanted to be completely upfront about that and say that we aren't going to be using that as a main feature of the game. Obviously, it's a little bit worrying, and I get that if I'm making all these different showcases about randomized terrain, but to explain why we're using it, I'll explain what the map grid is going to be. So the map grid is actually going to be a 500 by 500 tile wide, tile tall grid of maps, and previously my idea was for all of these maps to be 100 by 100. However, a couple concerns were brought up to me that if every map is 100 by 100, then we can't have a city that's coherent because it's going to be interrupted by those map edges, right? And that's not necessarily a huge issue, but it definitely breaks your immersion a little bit, so I wanted to resolve that. And just to let you guys know, that's not going to be the case anywhere. So instead of having all of the maps be 100 tiles by 100 tiles, we are going to have one central map that is 300 by 300, and then that is going to be bordered on all sides by maps that are 100 by 100. And I'm going to call that the central map and then the standard maps. So standard maps will surround it, and the central map will sit in the very center, as you'd guess, of the map grid. That way, when you move to one of the edges in the top right of the central map, it moves you off of that map and takes you to one of the standard maps to the top right of the actual, map itself in the map grid. Apologize for saying map so much. Anyway, I think that this is a good middle ground because that way we can still have a central area for players to work with, and 300 by 300 doesn't sound huge, but it really is. It's huge. So that'll be more than enough space, and more importantly, I think it'll be very accommodating for cities and everything else. So I think it's a good middle ground between 100 by 100 maps only, which is a great performance enhancer but very immersion breaking, and just having one huge map, which is very immersive but also has a huge performance cost. And I wanted to give you guys a little bit of a taste of terrain destruction. So what you're seeing on screen here is, well, that terrain destruction. It is going to get a little bit laggy just because of how many tiles are on screen, and this is, again, a clip taken from prior to my optimizations, but I think you guys can really appreciate how fast this is. Outside of the lag from the tiles nearby, this has basically no performance cost. I've upgraded it so that it no longer does thousands upon thousands of calculations per tile removed, and instead does about 16 to 32-ish. So the reason I'm showing this is because I'm thinking about doing something like this for combat, and this is very applicable to that. I can easily apply it so that when you're hit by a spell that knocks you back, it just plows you through a mountain or something like that. So I think that'd be pretty cool, and it would be essentially just an option, another option, like, the danger of a battle or an engagement or whatever. You would just choose if you want to use terrain destruction. It has to be polished a little bit, but I think still it's really cool and promising. It's not done yet, and it still has a lot of work to go, but I wanted to show it off anyway to you guys because I'm pretty proud of it. So in the future, we're going to be looking at some engagement changes and making those actually look kind of pretty. So we'll see what I can do about that, but just to let you guys know, in case you're worried about it like destroying the environment or making it look stupid or something, we are going to have it so that when you start an engagement, it saves all of the display objects in the range of your engagement, and then when you end the engagement, it will restore it all. That way you don't actually permanently damage the environment that the mappers have carefully constructed and make it look terrible. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope you guys look forward to the next showcase. I appreciate all of the support, and I appreciate all of the patrons. I'm very happy that I got to spend my birthday kind of slacking a little bit and then deliver a little bit longer of a showcase than usual. It's very exciting for me. I enjoy the opportunity, of course. Anyway, have a good day, guys. Bye.